part of what really made this film very attractive to us, and part of why we really wanted to play it, was that you do some really innovative things with the form. It's not just there's really nothing straightforward about this documentary, and you guys have a past of working in very innovative ways with music documentaries specifically. And I wanted to ask Sam and Scott, but also Reg, how, I mean, it must have been painstaking, the research that you did, and all of the archival footage and photos of it.
Sorry, I grabbed the mic from you just on that point. I just wanted to make a point about researching clearances, because my wife did the researching clearances on the movie. Cindy, stand up. Cindy Wolf, everyone. I'll let Sam and Scott answer the ACAD part of the question.
I do think it's important to recognize a couple of other people that are here, because, like Scott said before we got started, we get up here in our fancy duds and take all the credit for a lot of hard work that's done by a really amazing creative team at Banger. Derek Tokar, our head graphic artist, if you could stand up at the back. And also Alex Cooper, who edited the film with Reg. Alex, you need to stand up. Thank you. But to briefly, I mean, yeah, it's a painstaking process, like we've been saying all day today. This is 2.5 years in the making, and it was really 2 phases. We created the audio radio play and put this man through what felt like several hundred interviews, I'm sure, to get the story down, and then took a year of putting all the visuals to that story. And then, of course, once you start putting the visuals to the story, you begin to rejig the story. So it was a lot of late nights, a lot of arguments resolved by vodka.
Still unresolved, some of it.
How ironic.
Oh yeah, we were snorting them.
But yeah, I think, yeah, there was just some really innovative stuff. The way in which the graphics team combined photos with the footage to create scenes, I think was pretty fantastic. That was the goal. We wanted people to feel like they were in the moment, rather than pulling them out with contemporary interviews. We never wanted people to feel like they weren't in 1968 or 1971 or whatever it was. Yeah, I think we succeeded.
So I'm sure you guys have a lot of audience questions. I don't want to take up too much more time. So any questions? If you're going to just raise your hand. Yes.
What's your golf handicap, Alice?
What's your golf handicap, Alice?
4.
4?
Yes. 4. Now, when you quit drinking, you have to find another addiction. So, I just went from addiction to addiction. Golf is a handicap too. But, I found that the more I play golf, the more pissed off Alice is on stage. Because he just hates it. And I kind of like feed him that way. By the way, Dennis and Neil are here. Yeah! And I think, as we looked at this, we decided not to take anything out of the movie that we thought was important. So there was no editing. There were times, when you sit there and it's a little uncomfortable on both ends. And we say, Dennis, Neil, and Mike and I still do things together all the time. Playing on albums and doing charity gigs and things like that. They're still my best friends. And we really miss Glenn, of course. Glenn was our, in some strange way, was our anchor. In a lot of ways. he was the guy that we all lived to, because he was our first real musician in the band. Glenn was, he could play. And he was the first to really go down. He was the one that really lived it till it took him. And we do miss him. He was one of my favorite people in the world. Mike's not here. Mike's down in Mexico right now. But also Cindy. Cindy literally was the house mother and took care of us. Stand up, Cindy.
Cindy Smith,
Cindy made sure that we had clothes on our back. 1968. It's getting a little scary now. Also, my wife Cheryl. Who is now more gorgeous than she's ever been. She's a better dancer now than she was then. And of course, the inimitable Shep Gordon. Now, the funny thing about this is Shep has his own documentary out now called Supermensch that was that Mike Myers did on him. And we tell the same stories, but they're not the same stories. How we met, you know, each other. None of the stories jive together, but you have to remember we might have been drinking a little bit at the time. And, but I mean, you know, without all these people here, you know, nothing would have worked. And these guys drove me insane. Yeah, I've never done so much talking in my life. What, 50 hours of interviews? I kept saying, just say this out. I told you that already. You know, but it was, this is the first time I have seen the finished thing tonight. I had never seen it, so I made sure I didn't see it till tonight.
Are you going to bow down and say you're not worthy?
No. Not at all. But I'm waiting for part two. That ended, what, 1984? 86, 32 years later, we're still here, and more has happened since then. So, I probably should say we'll be on part two now. It's not just dramatic. I mean, you know, there was no relapse back into alcohol, so it's not that dramatic, but, you know. Any more questions? No math, okay. Yep.
I just also wanted to say hi and thank you for the inspiration. Just trying to talk to you, but to add a question to it, did Lester Bangs ever take back his crappy review of your original?
You know, Lester Bangs was a friend of ours, and we thought that was the greatest review we ever saw in our life. It was the most creative review. In fact, it was something that we would have written, you know. And we did become good friends with Lester Bangs. You know, and later on he did review other albums, and he kind of progressed with us. But Pretty's for You, it was so out there that now it's finally come around now to be, people listen to it now and say, you know, that's your best album. Really? Wow, you on something. But, you know, to the real Alice Cooper fans, the albums that they liked the best were the ones that were the blackout albums. The ones when I don't remember writing, recording, you know, touring with. There was like, you know, 3 albums there that were just blackouts.
Special Forces, Zipper Catches Skin, and
Yeah. Those are the albums I listen to now, and I kind of go, wow, but that's pretty good. That song was pretty good. Any more questions? Whoever. You know, Mike's hard to track down. Mike is just, he's like Izzy Stradlin. You know, he just takes off and he's in the desert, in the Mojave Desert somewhere, and you just can't track him down. Hard to pin down, and that's really the truth, you know. Neil and Dennis live very close together up in Connecticut. So they're findable. Mike is unfindable. You know, every once in a while we get a note from him that he's, you know, in Pakistan or something. You know, we never know what he's doing. So he was really the hardest guy to pin down just to get an interview.
Alice is usually somewhere between Spain and Mexico.
Yes, mostly Mexico.
Yeah, here.
I noticed that it was interesting. You never showed the people being interviewed. Why did you make that decision? And you decided you want to talk. It was, well, we started that from the beginning. We just said we were going to make a visually rich film that didn't have any politics. We said that we lost it. There's a couple other films like The Filthy Fury or The Kid Stays in Picture.
there was a couple songs that were sort of the tip of the hat to them, I think, especially, I think, more on Easy Action. Mr. and Misdemeanor was kind of rosy. And when we did Desperado, I think that was actually pretty much about remorse. You know, and people always say, you know, Jim died so young. The fact that he got to 27 was a miracle. he pushed it pretty hard, yeah. Yeah, Dunn was in the other studio. This was one of those nights when we're, you know, plugging along in London doing the album, and all of a sudden here comes the Hollywood Vampires. You know, it's Nielsen, Harry Nielsen comes in with T-Rex, Keith Moon, Ringo, Rick Gretsch, and okay, that studio, that session was going to be over right then because they were classic. And they all played on the $1 Million Babies album somewhere, but nobody can remember where they played. There's pictures, they see, right, you know, I mean, Mark Bolan playing, everybody played on the album, and then somebody said, hey, you know, Donovan's next door. And so I went next door and he had all these kids in there, you know, they were singing the song. And I said, enough folk music for you, come here. And he did, you know, on the song $1 Million Babies, he was the British voice, you know, Nico Dense and United. And I think he had more fun doing that than anything in his life. And, but people just recently went, that was Donovan. They didn't know that. Yeah, that was Donovan.
You've done a biography now, you've done a behind the music, now this. Did this movie bring out anything that you missed in the other ones or you have forgotten about?
Well, you know, the dichotomy of me and Alice, you know, it still goes on. You know, I mean, I play Alice every night. I realized that there were two Alices. There was the victim Alice, the early alcoholic victim Alice, who represented all, you know, the disenfranchised kids out there. And that was fun to play because there was just no rules. There was absolutely no rules, nothing to stop us. When I got sober, I realized that I wasn't this anymore, that Alice needed to be, instead of being the one, he needed to be the dominatrix now.
He needed to be
He
the one
needed to
that
be the
caught
one
these?
that was the arrogant villain. You know, and that's the way I play him now. You know, I think that's the way Alice should be played now. It's sort of this arrogant villain that could slip on a banana peel. You know, he might slit your throat, but he'd never swear at you. Yeah, let me tell you something about this. There's something about this that's actually really, really interesting because we always thought there needs to be an element of circus in this. There needs to be an element of vaudeville. But at the same time, there needs to be an element of danger. When I go to the circus and I see a guy in the cage with a real tiger and he's got a chair, I mean, I have a machine gun myself. You know, that tiger could kill me. The guy on the tightrope up there with no net under him, you know, he could fall. That's a 40-pound blade. And it only misses me by that much every night. The closer it gets to me, the better it looks. So we kept lowering it, lowering it, lowering it. Every single, to this day, when that blade's in there, if I don't move at the right time, it's going to hit me. You know, so the element of that, this could be Alice's last concert, is always in the show. The hanging, there's something really unnerving about the floor opening up and you dropping. And the noose stopping right here instead of here. You know, if the wire breaks, I was at that concert, I was there. But we keep it like that because of the fact that, in all honesty, that makes the show more, gives it that extra edge. I'm sorry, what? Well, it's pretty, you know, I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen, but the wire did break in London one time, and it caught me here. I snapped my head back, I had a burn under here. If I wouldn't have done that, they would have caught me, and it would have done some damage, a lot of damage. But I went through the floor, you know, knocked me out and everything like that. But then we realized that you can't do 100 shows without changing the wire. It loses a little bit of its strength.
So we have time for one more question.
Yeah, Trigger Man is actually a really good stage song too. Mark that down, Chuck. Trigger Man, yeah, was one of those rock songs that really deserves to be on stage. Wicked Young Man, I think, was the one that took its place. But Trigger Man is one of those songs. When you do songs in the studio, you're going, okay, that's great, 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 great. And then you go, stage song. That's a stage song. We always did that in the original band. We always knew what songs were going to be stage songs and which ones weren't. You could just feel them. You knew when the band was in playing, you could see the band, how they were going to be on stage with that. And you say, we keep that one, we keep that one, we keep that one. Audience isn't going to get that at all. But you're right, Trigger Man is one of those songs. And every tour that we do, we always throw in one or two songs that the audience wouldn't expect that would make a person like you really happy. You know, something that off a really obscure album, you know, the 15th cut that nobody ever hears on the radio. And let's do that one. You know, then we'll see who the real fans are.
Everything's orange.
Wow.
10 seconds of orange.
Keep your eye on this guy.
So I just want to say one last thing. I think it seems there's sort of a common theme in heavy metal. Ronnie James Dio talks a lot about the dark, the light, and I have a feeling that a lot of the most brutal, terrifying performers are the nicest people on earth. So, like, I think that you touched upon this a lot in the film, but in your experience working with some of these people that some of the public might deem as like psychotic killers, like, do you feel like those people tend to have a sort of softer side to them?
No, they're all psychic killers.
On that note.
No, it really is true that these guys have worked with Iron Maiden, they've worked with, you know, Rush, and people like that, and I'm sure they're going to go on and work with other guys, you know, in the business with interesting careers, you know. Maryland would be kind of interesting too. But at the same time, you find that guys that have been through the wars, 3 or 4 wars, I mean, it's like the 5th time around for us. You've been there, you've done it. You kind of know where the traps are, you know where the, and I see young bands and I go, oh, what, don't step over there, but you're going to miss it. Oh, yeah, see it. And if the only way you can avoid those traps is to live it. You have to get through it, you know. I found my way through, of course, I was the prodigal son. I grew up in the church, went away from the church, came back to the church. And that was my way of getting back, you know. But now, I love playing Alice. I mean, I can't wait to play Alice on the next tour. It's my favorite thing. But at the same time, you know, I love being at home with my kids also. And my wife travels with me now. In fact, Cheryl is back in the show. Better than ever. And it's so much fun to travel, you know, with your wife, knowing that she's actually more talented than you are. She plays the nurse now, and she's just horrific. She gets up there, and I look at her and I go, you can't make yourself ugly because you're still the best looking thing out there. So, anyway, we just had our 38th anniversary. And sing with Chef too, Chef. I mean, you just keep getting better looking all the time. It's amazing.
And just the last word, we did a lot of heavy metal docs, and we perpetuated that Ronnie James Dio came up with the metal horrors, but if you can see from this film, it wasn't as...
No knocking it. It was Glenn.
Was Glenn doing that? Yeah,
we got it on camera.
Glenn thought that he was doing hook 'em horns. He was, you know, he was at Texas University or Aggies. The first time I saw this, I went, oh, Texas